The dynamite hit the ground 3 feet from Jake Ryder's boot. He had maybe 2 seconds. The fuse sizzled like a snake's warning. Around him, the Arizona Canyon walls trapped the sound of gunfire, turning every shot into thunder. Black Tom Creed stood on the burning stagecoach, silhouetted against flames that licked 30 feet high, and he was laughing. No witnesses. Tom screamed into the smoke. Jake dove. The explosion tore through rock and sand, launching him sideways into a boulder that knocked the wind from his lungs. Shrapnel whistled overhead. When he opened his eyes, his ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Blood ran hot down his temple. The Winchester rifle lay 6 feet away, half buried in debris. But he was alive. For now. Let me take you back 12 hours, to when this nightmare began with a simple job and a payload that would make men kill without hesitation. The Tucson station smelled like horse sweat and desperation. Jake stood in the shade of the depot's overhang, watching the stagecoach driver secure the strongbox beneath the passenger bench. $50,000 in gold and silver. Enough money to start a ranch, buy a business, or get yourself killed trying to protect it. You sure about this run, Ryder? The station master wiped his brow with a stained handkerchief. We've had reports. Desert Viper's been hitting coaches from here to Yuma. Jake checked his Winchester, the walnut stock smooth under his palm from years of use. That's why you hired me. He wasn't being cocky. Since the war ended 17 years ago, Jake had ridden shotgun on 43 payroll runs. He'd been ambushed twice, wounded once, and never lost a shipment. The scars on his left shoulder told one story. The notches on his reputation told another. The passengers climbed aboard. First came a banker named Horace Finch, his suit already dark with sweat stains despite the morning hour. He clutched a leather briefcase like it contained his firstborn child and wouldn't make eye contact. Nervous money men always made Jake's jaw tighten. Next, a prospector who introduced himself as Lucky Pete Dawson, though his weathered face and empty pockets suggested the nickname was aspirational. He carried a pickaxe and wore optimism like cheaper men wore cologne. Then she appeared. The woman wore a black traveling dress with a veiled hat that obscured her features. She moved with purpose, not the mincing steps of a society lady, but the measured stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going and wouldn't let anything stop her. 2 leather cases. No husband, no chaperone, no explanation. Ma'am. Jake tipped his hat. She nodded once. Her gloved hands never stopped moving, adjusting her luggage, checking her reticule. Through the veil, he caught a glimpse of green eyes that assessed him the way a card player reads a hand. The driver, old Sam McCready, climbed onto his bench and gathered the reins. 6 hours to Fort Yuma if we push hard. Stage stop at Gila Bend if we need water. Jake swung up beside him, settling into the shotgun seat with his rifle across his knees. The desert stretched ahead like a promise and a threat. The Sonoran could kill you with heat, thirst, or worse. Much worse. Let's ride, he said. The horses lurched forward. Tucson disappeared behind them in a cloud of dust. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. That was the problem. Jake had learned to read the desert during the war, tracking Confederate supply lines through terrain that looked empty but never was. The Sonoran had a rhythm, lizards skittering across rocks, hawks riding thermals, the constant whisper of wind through creosote bushes. When that rhythm broke, when the silence grew too thick, you had about 5 minutes before hell came calling. The silence started around mile marker 17. No birds, no insects, just the creak of wheels and the steady clip of hooves on hardpan. Sam. Jake kept his voice low. You feel that? The old driver's knuckles went white on the reins. Yeah. How far to the canyon? 1.5 miles. The canyon. Of course. Mesquite Canyon was a natural choke point. Walls rising 60 feet on both sides, barely wide enough for the stagecoach to pass through. Tactically, it was a nightmare. Historically, it was where 3 coaches had been robbed in the past 2 years. Jake's shoulder itched where the old bullet wound never quite healed right. His brother's voice echoed in his head, 15 years dead, but still clear. Watch the high ground, Jake. Always the high ground. Thomas had died on a ridge in Virginia, cut down by sharpshooters he never saw coming. Jake had held him while he bled out, promising things he couldn't deliver. Promises about going home, about living long enough to meet Thomas's newborn daughter, about justice. He'd kept exactly one of those promises. Sam, when we hit the canyon, You keep those horses moving no matter what. You hear gunfire, you whip them hard. We run the gauntlet or we die trying." Inside the coach, Lucky Pete was telling some story about a silver vein in the Superstition Mountains. The banker's nervous laughter carried on the wind. The woman sat silent, her veil still down. The canyon mouth appeared ahead like a scar in the earth. Jake chambered around. They came from the rocks like locusts. 6 riders materialized on the canyon rim, silhouettes against the brutal sun. Their faces were covered with bandanas. Their rifles were not. "Hands up or you're dead." The voice belonged to the man in the center, the one whose horse stood perfectly still while the others pranced with nervous energy. Sam hauled on the reins. The horses screamed and reared. Jake was already moving, bringing the Winchester up, finding the first target. His shot cracked across the canyon. A rider on the left jerked backward, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, returning fire. Bullets spanged off rocks. One punched through the coach roof with a sound like a fist hitting leather. Inside, someone screamed, "Go, Sam, go." But Sam was slumping sideways, blood spreading across his shirt in a flower of red. The reins fell slack. The horses bolted. Jake grabbed the reins with his left hand, trying to control 4 panicked animals while operating his rifle with his right. It was like trying to rope the wind. The coach careened sideways, one wheel lifting off the ground. Behind him, passengers tumbled against each other. More riders appeared ahead, cutting off their escape. They'd planned this perfectly, boxing the coach inside the canyon with nowhere to run. The man in the center rode forward. He pulled down his bandana. Jake would remember that face in his nightmares for years. A scar ran from Black Tom Creed's left temple to his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. His eyes held the flat effect of a man who killed so many times he stopped counting. "The strongbox," Tom said. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. "Hand it over, and maybe I let the passengers live." "Maybe isn't good enough," Jake said. Tom smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "No witnesses it is, then." He gestured. 2 of his men produced sticks of dynamite, fuses already lit. Time compressed into a series of snapshots. The banker's white face pressed against the coach window. Lucky Pete shouting something Jake couldn't hear over the blood roaring in his ears. The mysterious woman's hand disappearing into her reticule. The first stick of dynamite landed in the driver's box. Jake kicked it away. It exploded in midair, 20 feet to the left, showering them with rock fragments. His ears went dead, replaced by that awful ringing. The second stick hit the coach roof and rolled. "Out." Jake's voice sounded distant, like he was shouting underwater. "Everybody out now." He dove off the driver's box as the dynamite detonated. The blast lifted the entire coach 6 inches off the ground. Wood splintered. Metal shrieked. And then the real nightmare began. Fire. The explosion had ignited the dry timber frame. Flames spread across the coach like a living thing, hungry and fast. Black smoke billowed into the canyon, thick enough to choke on. Through the chaos, Jake saw the passengers stumbling clear. Lucky Pete had blood running down his face, but he was moving. The banker crawled on hands and knees, his precious briefcase forgotten. And the woman? The woman had produced a derringer from somewhere and was firing at the riders with mechanical precision. "Get to the rocks." Jake grabbed his Winchester from where it had landed. His legs screamed in pain. Looking down, he saw his pants legs soaked with blood, a bullet graze across his thigh that he didn't remember taking. No time. Never enough time. The Desert Vipers were dismounting now, using the burning coach as cover to advance. Tom Creed stood in the flames like a demon, prying open the strongbox with a crowbar. Gold coins spilled onto the ground, glinting in the firelight. "Take it all," Tom shouted to his men, "and then kill everyone who saw our faces." Jake made it to a boulder 30 feet from the coach. The woman arrived seconds later, breathing hard but steady. Up close, he could see her veil had burned away. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, with a hard edge that came from doing difficult things and living with the consequences. "Who are you?" he asked, reloading. "Lila Kane, Pinkerton Detective Agency." She snapped open her derringer to reload. "I've been tracking these bastards for 6 months. They've hit 9 coaches, killed 17 people. Well, they just added 2 more to their list." Jake gestured at where Sam's body had fallen, now partially obscured by smoke. The horses had scattered into the desert. Lucky Pete scrambled up beside them, clutching a shotgun he'd pulled from the burning wreckage. His hands shook, but his eyes were clear. That shotgun was under Sam's seat. Figured we might need it. Can you shoot? Lila asked. Lady, I've been shooting claim jumpers since before you were born. Pete checked the loads. Both barrels ready. Just point me at the bad guys. The banker was still crawling, heading for a different set of rocks. He looked back once, his face twisted with terror, then disappeared into a crevice. Gunfire raked their position. Rock chips stung Jake's face. He returned fire, forcing 2 Vipers to duck. But there were 6 of them and only 3 defenders, and the Vipers had all the time in the world. We need to break their advantage, Jake said. Lila, you still have that flare gun? She blinked. How did you? Saw the shape in your boot when you climbed down. Standard Pinkerton kit for signaling backup. Backup is 10 miles away. Maybe more. Then we better live long enough for them to arrive. The coach was fully engulfed now, flames reaching 40 feet high. The heat was intense enough to blister skin from 20 yards away. Through the smoke and fire, Jake could see Tom directing his men, splitting them into 2 groups to flank the defender's position. Professional. Military trained, maybe. Confederate guerrillas who'd never stopped fighting after Appomattox. Just like the men who killed Thomas. Jake's vision tunneled. The canyon faded. For a moment, he was back on that ridge in Virginia, watching his brother's blood soak into rebel soil, hearing Thomas's last words, "Don't let them win, Jake. Don't ever let them win." Lila's hand on his shoulder snapped him back. You with me? Yeah. He blinked away the ghosts. Yeah, I'm here. Good. Because I've got a plan, but it's crazy. I like crazy. She pointed at the burning coach. That's a bonfire visible for miles. Between the smoke and the flames, cavalry from Fort Yuma will see it and investigate. But Tom knows that too. He's going to grab what he can and run. Unless we keep him here, Jake finished. Make him choose between the gold and escaping clean. Jake. Exactly. But that means one of us goes hunting. Jake checked his ammunition. 12 rounds left. I'll do it. You 2 hold this position and make noise. Lots of noise. Keep them focused here. Lucky Pete grinned through his bloody teeth. Son, I can make more noise than a Saturday night in Tombstone. A bullet cracked past Jake's head, close enough that he felt the heat. One of the Vipers was on the canyon rim now, using the high ground for a better angle. The same tactic that had killed Thomas. Not this time. Jake waited for the shooter to shift position, then broke from cover in a sprinting crouch. His wounded leg nearly buckled, but he pushed through the pain, using the smoke as concealment. Behind him, Pete's shotgun boomed like cannon fire, covering his movement. The canyon floor was a maze of boulders and scrub brush. Jake moved between them, each step calculated, using every lesson the war had taught him. Low and quiet. Fast when exposed, patient when covered. Never where they expect you to be. A Viper appeared ahead, maybe 20 years old, with a face that still had the softness of youth. He was searching the smoke, rifle raised, when Jake came around a rock formation behind him. Drop it, Jake said. The kid spun, bringing his rifle around. Jake's Winchester cracked once. The Viper fell. Jake didn't look at the body. Couldn't afford to. He took the dead man's ammunition belt and kept moving. The smoke was thicker here, close to the burning coach. Jake's lungs burned with each breath. His eyes watered. But through the haze, he could see Tom Creed stuffing gold coins into saddlebags with methodical efficiency, while 2 of his men stood guard. 3 against 1. Bad odds. Jake had fought worse. He crept closer, using the roar of the flames to mask his footsteps. 30 yards. 20. He could hear Tom muttering numbers under his breath, counting his stolen fortune. 15 yards. One of the guards turned, some sixth sense warning him. His eyes went wide as he saw Jake emerge from the smoke like a ghost. Jake shot him in the chest before he could shout a warning. The second guard spun, firing wildly. Jake dove left, rolled, came up shooting. His bullet took the man in the throat. He went down clutching his neck, drowning in his own blood. Tom Creed faced him across the burning wreckage, and for 3 heartbeats neither man moved. You're persistent, Tom said finally. He'd drawn his revolver, but hadn't raised it yet. I respect that. It's a shame you have to die. Funny, I was thinking the same about you. The difference is, I'm walking away from this canyon with gold in my saddlebags. Tom gestured at the chaos around them. What are you getting except a hero's burial? Justice, Jake said. For Sam. For all the people you've murdered. Tom's expression didn't change. Justice is a story we tell children so they sleep at night. This is the real world. Only thing that matters is who's standing when the smoke clears. He raised his revolver. Jake fired first. His shot hit Tom in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The outlaw's return shot went wild, punching into a burning timber. Jake advanced, working the Winchester's lever action, putting another round in the chamber. Tom clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. But he was smiling. Always smiling. You think you've won? Tom laughed, a wet sound that spoke of punctured lungs. Look around you, soldier boy. My boys are still out there. They'll gun down your friends while you're wasting time on me. Jake's blood ran cold. He'd been so focused on Tom that he'd forgotten about the other Vipers. They'd had time to regroup, to coordinate. A distant shotgun blast echoed through the canyon. Pete's weapon. Then silence. No, Jake whispered. Tom's smile widened. Told you. No witnesses. Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded through Jake's veins. This was what he'd felt watching Thomas die. This helpless fury at being too late, too slow, too human to save everyone. But Thomas had taught him one more lesson. In those final moments on that Virginia ridge. Save who you can, Jake. Save who you can. Jake reversed his grip on the Winchester and swung it like a club. The stock connected with Tom's jaw with a sound like snapping wood. The outlaw dropped. Jake was running before Tom hit the ground, sprinting back toward the boulder where he'd left Lila and Pete. His wounded leg screamed protests. He ignored it. Everything depended on the next 30 seconds. He emerged from the smoke to find a tableau from a nightmare. Two Vipers had flanked the position. They stood over Pete, who lay unmoving, blood pooling beneath him. The banker was pressed against the rock, hands raised, begging for his life. And Lila was fighting. She'd produced a knife from somewhere and was locked in close combat with one attacker. Their struggle a brutal dance of slash and parry. The second Viper was raising his rifle, taking aim at her exposed back. Jake didn't have time to aim properly. He fired from the hip, a desperation shot that went against every principle of marksmanship he'd ever learned. The bullet hit the Viper in the side. Not a killing shot, but enough to ruin his aim. His rifle discharged into the ground as he folded over. Lila used the distraction to drive her knife up under her opponent's ribs. He gasped once, then went still. She let him fall and spun, Derringer appearing in her hand, putting a bullet in the wounded Viper's chest before he could recover. Then silence. The kind that comes after battles, when your ears are ringing too loud to hear anything else, and you not sure if you alive or just haven't realized you dead yet. Jake stumbled to Pete's side. The prospector's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. A bullet had caught him in the gut, the worst kind of wound. But he was alive. Lucky Pete, Jake said, pressing his hand over the wound to slow the bleeding. Hell of a name to live up to. Pete's eyes fluttered open. Did we get him? Yeah, old-timer. We got him. Good. Pete coughed wetly. That's good. Lila appeared beside them, already tearing strips from her dress to make bandages. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, packing the wound, wrapping it tight. She'd done this before. How many left? She asked. Tom's down, unconscious. Maybe two others still mobile. Jake reloaded his Winchester with the last of his ammunition. But they'll be running by now. They've lost half their gang, and the cavalry's coming. As if summoning them with his words, a bugle call echoed across the desert. Jake looked up to see riders on the canyon rim, blue uniforms bright against the brown landscape. 20 troopers, moving in formation, led by a lieutenant who looked young enough to be someone's kid brother. It was over. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The cavalry secured the scene, rounding up the surviving Vipers who'd tried to flee into the desert. Tom Creed regained consciousness just in time to be clapped in irons, his shoulder bandaged by a disgusted army surgeon who made it clear he'd rather let the outlaw bleed. Lucky Pete was loaded onto a travois, still breathing, still fighting. The surgeon gave him a 50-50 chance if they got him to Fort Yuma within 3 hours. The troopers rode out at a gallop, taking Pete with them. The banker, Horace Finch, was found wedged in his crevice, still clutching his briefcase. He emerged sheepishly, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Jake sat on a boulder, letting a corporal bandage his leg while he watched the coach burn down to embers. $50,000 in gold and silver lay scattered around it, recovered and counted by soldiers who looked like they'd never seen that much money in their lives combined. Lila approached as the sun began its descent toward evening. She'd retrieved her veil from the wreckage, though it was scorched beyond repair. Without it, she looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd finished a job they'd started long ago. The lieutenant says they'll transport the gold under military escort, she said. Tom and his remaining boys will hang in Yuma. 17 murders, Jake said. About time. 18 if Pete doesn't make it. She settled onto the boulder beside him. You fought well. So did you. Pinkerton training. And 4 years in an Apache camp after they took me when I was 12. She saw his expression and shrugged. Long story. I learned to fight or die. I learned to fight. They sat in companionable silence, watching the soldiers work. Finally, Jake asked the question that had been bothering him since the shooting stopped. The banker's briefcase. What was really in it? Lila's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. You caught that, did you? Man doesn't cling to a briefcase that hard unless there's something more than papers inside. She gestured. Horace Finch was speaking with the lieutenant, his face animated, hands gesturing wildly. The briefcase sat at his feet, and even from this distance Jake could see how the leather bulged unnaturally. The 50,000 everyone knows about. Lila said. That was real, in the strongbox, like Tom expected. But there was another 30,000 in Finch's case, divided between my luggage and his. Backup, in case of robbery, which I was hired to arrange, because someone in Tucson had tipped off the Desert Vipers about the payroll run. Inside information, Jake said. That's how they knew exactly when and where to hit us. Exactly. We used the known shipment as bait, and Tom took it. Now he hangs, and the real money makes it to Fort Yuma. She looked at him. You didn't know you were bait, obviously. Neither did Sam or Pete. That part one regret. Sam's dead because of it. Sam's dead because Outlaws killed him, Lila corrected, steel in her voice. Don't confuse the gun with the hand that pulls the trigger. Tom Creed chose to murder innocent people for money. That's on him, not you, not me. Jake wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. She was right, in the cold calculus of it. But Sam was still dead, and Pete was dying, and the price of justice always seemed to fall on people who could least afford to pay it. What now? He asked instead. I file my report. Tom hangs. Pinkerton sends me after the next bunch of killers stupid enough to rob their clients. She stood, brushing dust from her ruined dress. You? I'm going to visit Pete if he makes it. Buy him a drink if he doesn't. To Lucky Pete, Lila said softly. To Lucky Pete. She started to walk away, then paused. You ever think about working with the Pinkertons? We could use someone with your skills. I'm just a stagecoach guard. You a tactician who kept 3 civilians alive against 6 professional killers in an ambush situation. She met his eyes. That's not just. That's exceptional. Think about it. She walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and the dying fire. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in the Fort Yuma cemetery, looking at a freshly carved headstone. Samuel Sam McCready, born 1825, died 1882. He drove the line with honor beside it. Pete's grave marker was older, weathered by desert wind. Peter Lucky Dawson, born 1831, died 1882. His luck finally ran out. Pete had died 2 days after reaching Fort Yuma, gunshot wounds being what they were. But he'd lasted long enough to tell the doctors about his claim and the superstitions, to make sure his sister in California got whatever he left behind. Which wasn't much, but it was more than Tom Creed would have left her. Jake laid a whiskey bottle between the graves. Sam would have appreciated the gesture. Pete would have laughed. I'm sorry, he said to the stones. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you got caught up in this. The desert wind didn't answer. It never did. As he walked back toward town, Jake thought about Lila's offer. About spending his life hunting men like Tom Creed, stopping them before they could kill people like Sam and Pete. There was a certain justice in it, a certain poetry, but there was also the memory of Thomas, bleeding out on that Virginia ridge, whispering his last words. Go home, Jake. Live. Don't let this war take everything. Maybe it was time to listen. Maybe it was time to stop fighting and start living. Or maybe, Jake thought as he passed the Pinkerton office and saw Lila through the window filing her report, maybe fighting was a kind of living all its own. He thought about it for another 3 steps. Then he pushed open the door. Lila looked up, surprised but not displeased. Changed your mind. Tell me about the job, Jake said. She smiled. A real smile this time, not the careful mask she wore for strangers. It'll get you shot at. The pay's terrible. You sleep in worse places than you can imagine and eat food that barely qualifies as edible. Sounds like the war all over again. The difference is, this time we're hunting people who deserve it. She pushed a piece of paper across the desk. This came in this morning. Stage robbery in New Mexico. 3 dead, including a little girl. The gang calls themselves the Red River Boys. Jake looked at the paper, at the names of the dead, at the little girl's age, 7 years old. He thought about Thomas, about Sam and Pete, about all the people who died because men like Tom Creed thought taking what they wanted was worth any price. When do we leave? He asked. Tomorrow at dawn. I'll be here. As Jake walked back into the fading sunlight, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war. Not peace exactly. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple knowledge that some fights were worth fighting, regardless of the cost. The West was still wild. Outlaws still rode. People still died. But not if Jake Ryder had anything to say about it. Behind him, the Fort Yuma Telegraph began clicking out a message to Pinkerton offices across the frontier. New operative acquired. Former military. Proven in combat. Specialization, impossible odds. The war might have ended, but Jake's fight was just beginning. And somewhere out there, the Red River Boys were about to learn that when you left no witnesses, you made the worst enemy of all. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The sun set over Arizona, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Tomorrow would bring fresh battles. Tonight, Jake cleaned his Winchester and remembered his promises to the dead. The West tested a man's mettle, forged him in fire and blood. But it was how you responded that defined you. Not the running, not the hiding, but the moment when you stood tall and said, "Not here, not now, not while I still draw breath." Have you ever faced a moment like that? A time when everything told you to run, but something deeper made you stay? The stories we tell about the Old West often focus on the outlaws, the gunfights, the gold. But the real story, the one that matters, is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. Sam keeping his horses steady even as bullets flew. Pete grabbing that shotgun despite his age and fear. Lila fighting with a knife when her bullets ran out. And Jake, choosing to keep fighting instead of running, because some things matter more than survival. If you've made it this far, you understand that the frontier wasn't just a place. It was a state of mind, a decision to face the darkness and refuse to blink first. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about courage, sacrifice, and the thin line between justice and vengeance. Comment below. Would you have fought alongside Jake, or would you have hidden like the banker? There's no wrong answer, only honest ones. It's 2 p.m. here in Houston as I write this on October 11th, 2025. Where are you reading this from? What time is it in your world? Thanks for sticking with me through this long tale. I know some of you are reading this late at night, burning the midnight oil like I used to. Take care of yourselves. The stories will still be here tomorrow. Rest matters, especially as we get older and realize we're not as invincible as we once thought. Until next time, keep writing. Keep fighting the good fight. And remember, the best way to honor those who fell is to keep standing for what they believed in. No witnesses, Tom Creed said. He was wrong. We're all witnesses now.